Hey everyone, Razzle here. It's been about 2 months since I came off trail from my failed 2025 AT Thruhike attempt. Just under 2 months. But I've had some time to reflect, and the purpose of this video is to first help those who are planning on doing a future through hike of the Appalachian Trail. And then also to just let you know what happened with mine. I'm gonna talk about my two biggest mistakes that I made and what I hold in the future, and also kind of go through what was happening in my mind as I went through each day, so that you kind of get a picture of that. I'm also going to talk a little bit about how I prepared and what I didn't prepare for. So I spent about almost 3 years preparing for my AT Thruhike, and I did that by first doing a lot of research on equipment, because I had not hiked, overnight camping and long distance hiking. I hadn't done that since I was younger, and so the equipment and technology has changed a lot since then. So I researched heavily gear, and then I started using it and testing it in the southern Adirondacks, and I did that for 3 years. The longest hike that I did before I went to the AT was the Cranberry Lake 50. It was a 54. I ended up doing 54 miles, a loop hike in northwestern New York. And I had planned on doing the Northville Placid Trail this last summer, but I broke my jaw a few weeks before I was supposed to leave for that, so I never got to do that. And I'll come back to Northville Placid Trail later. I did do a section of it, and that was helpful. But another thing that I did was I read a lot of books on the AT. Two of the most important ones that I think one needs to read are Appalachian Trials by Zach Davis, and the other one is Pushing North by Trey Free. Appalachian Trials, and this really goes back to one of my mistakes, was I'm not sure my why was strong enough. Okay, Zach talks about you have to have a really strong why. Why am I hiking the Appalachian Trail? But he goes through not just all the physical preparations and things like that. He goes into the mental aspect of the hike, which is huge. And then Trey Free talks, Early Riser is his trail name. He talked a lot about the mental aspect as well. Because really the physical you can get through. My legs, even though I didn't have trail legs because I wasn't there long enough, my legs hurt after the first couple days. The approach trail really killed me. But I recovered after a couple nights in a hostel, and I was hiking decent miles after that and really wasn't feeling that bad. It was something else later on that really ended my hike. But that's I watched all of Early Riser's videos, and so I could see him going through the hike and what was going through his mind, which caused him to write that book. And the other thing I did was I watched a lot of YouTube videos, as most of you probably do. I watched successful hikers, and I particularly I learned that one hiker, Mama Bear and Baby or Little Bear, had gotten off trail, and I had been following them some. But I watched all their videos just to see if I could see, what they had filmed on camera would give me any indication as to why they ended up making the decision to get off. So the short of it is, I read a lot of books, I did a lot of hiking, tested a lot of gear, And I went through I bought the AT guide. I kind of planned out my first week with alternates and bailouts and everything else. Planned some minor resupplies, but nothing major, because I planned on resupplying in town. My mindset was I'm not going to quit, and I'm especially not going to quit at Neal's Gap, where the shoe tree is, because it's only 30 something miles of the actual trail, 40 if you count the approach trail, and that's exactly where I quit. My story's not over, but it was for 2025. And so here's what happened as I go through each day with you.
So day 0 was obviously a day of adrenaline. I did have a 6.5 hour drive from home to Georgia. But as we pulled into Amicalola Falls, my heart's pounding. I'm actually here. I'm at the place I've only seen on YouTube videos before. Approaching the visitor center was just incredible. And then, of course, as we went around to the backside to see the arch for the first time, my wife and I got our picture taken at the arch that day. And after we perused the visitor center, we went up to the lodge where we were spending the night. And of course, that map that's in there, that's just massive, and it really puts into perspective what 2,200 miles looks like. But we had dinner, and that was day 0. Of course, day 1, base camp. It was the first day of base camp. I got my back tag. Of course, it was raining and cold out, mid 30s and rain, but I said goodbye to my wife. It was pretty emotional. I started at the approach trail, and I'm not going to say this was a mistake, but as far as the weather, that I was properly dressed. I had no problems with that. It was just, if I were to do it again, I either wouldn't do the approach trail. I'm not going to do the approach trail again if and when I go back, but I would schedule it so that I did it like the day before I was actually starting, or maybe even a couple days before, just to give my body a little time to recover. Now, if you are like super in shape and you've been doing a lot of elevation and that type of thing, it might not be a big of a deal for you. And I didn't feel it so much that day. I mean, I did. By the time I reached Springer, some of my muscles were really cramping up a little bit, and I kind of really wanted to. I kind of wanted to stay in that shelter around Springer, but there was a sign there that kind of said, maybe go to a different place. But as I'm walking the approach trail, I was still pretty high on adrenaline. The rain didn't bother me at all. Walking through the fog was really cool. And so I really got a good sense of, what I was getting into. The approach trail is pretty brutal. And then, of course, seeing the plaque and touching that first white blaze, I was just high on adrenaline. It was just so awesome. So anyway, my goal is to reach Stover Creek Shelter. I got about a mile or so to the parking lot and trailhead, and then about another couple miles, and I'm cramping a little bit, but I do make it to Stover Creek Shelter. I ended up spending the night with about 4 or 5 guys. The next day, we'd gone through a pretty good storm that night, so I was glad to be in a shelter, but it was wet, rainy. It didn't rain too much. My goal was to get to Hawk Mountain Shelter, which was not very far away, only about 5 miles. and my legs felt better. I got a good night's rest. I did have to put on a kind of wet shirt because of a little bit of sweat from the day before. But I made it to Hawk Mountain Shelter really without any issues. I felt halfway decent there. And I stopped, I looked around, I realized, you know what, I'm here way too early. It was like 11 or 11:30. And so I decided to go ahead and push on. And so my goal was to get to Gooch Mountain Shelter, but I didn't realize I was going to have to hike over Sassafras. And of course, the muscles in my body really started to hurt again. And I was running out of daylight. I didn't think I was going to make it to Gooch Mountain Shelter, even though later on I found out that the terrain wasn't that bad. So at the top of the mountain, I called Above the Clouds Hostel. They came up me up at Cooper's Gap, and I spent 2 days there recovering, and that worked out really well. I can tell you that as I was hiking over Sassafras, probably 100 times in my mind is telling me, dude, you are not going to physically be able to do this 2,000 miles. But at the same time, I was like, I know that I expect this, and I will get through it. And after those 2 days in the hostel, my body did recover quite well. So my original plan was just go to Gooch Mountain Gap, it's just a few miles, and spend the day, get the quick win in. But I ran into a trail ambassador along the way, and she shared with me that there's a big storm coming in and very cold weather, and that I don't want to be out in it if I don't have to. So I got the weather from my Garmin, and according to that, it was supposed to start snowing about 11 a.m. the next day. So I decided to push on to Lance Creek, and I figured if I can get to Lance Creek and I can beat the storm, get over Blood Mountain, I'll be fine. But I made it to the shelter here. Again, like I said, I hung around for a little bit. Just kind of checked out where the privy was and the water and stuff. And then, of course, when I got to Gooch Gap, I got the pleasure of having Trail Magic from Fresh Ground, who I had seen on, YouTube, I don't know how many times. And so that was just awesome. I mean, that was kind of almost like a little dream come true. Like a check off my bucket list to get Trail Magic from Fresh Ground's Leapfrog Cafe. So I got to meet him and talk to him, and that was pretty awesome. So I pushed on to Lance Creek. Some couple good elevations along the way. But it wasn't that bad. Like I said, my body really recovered. So physically, at this point, I'm doing well. When I got to Woody Gap, there were quite a few day hikers there because a couple of the best vistas in the area, as you are right after you enter the Blood Mountain Wilderness. A lot of teenagers and families. A lot of the teens had their boom boxes blaring, so that was not great, but got to experience these great views. And I got to Lance Creek, I got set up, and I decided I'm getting up at 5 a.m. so I can beat this storm and get over Blood Mountain before it really starts snowing. I get up at 5 a.m. and it's already starting to spit snow. So I packed up as quickly as I could, and I started night hiking. I probably night hiked for about an hour and a half before it actually got light out, but I made a huge mistake. This was my first, probably biggest mistake, is I said in my mind that I'm only going to Neal's Gap. I'm just going over this mountain, so it doesn't matter what I wear. So I didn't wear my rain gear at all. I just wore my microfleece hoodie, and that was a really big mistake, because I got soaked and then I got cold. Not right away, because I was hiking, because I was moving, but by the time I got to Neal's Gap, I was near hypothermic. That judgment call alone is probably one of the biggest contributing factors as to why I quit my thru hike. I should not have done that, and I know that now. But the other thing that I realized, and this was going through my head when I made the decision, was that all of the trail markers on top of Blood Mountain are on the granite itself. There's no cairns or anything like that. There's a maze of trails up there going to different vistas, and if it hadn't been for Scott, who you see here, Scott Free Hiking, who had done this part of the trail before, kind of guiding me down, I could have been wandering around up there for a while, even with GPS. I did have micro spikes on, which worked great. I'm so glad I had them, because obviously with 2 inches of snow on the granite, it was slippery. We had to climb over these boulders and everything. But we get down to Neal's Gap finally, and I'm near hypothermic. I'm hanging out by the wood stove. I'm shaking. I'm cold. The guy in there, I think his name's Bill, was like, you should change your clothes. And I'm like, where? So I ended up getting a shuttle to a hotel. He hooked me up with a really great shuttle, and they were in high demand that day because everybody was getting off trail. We were going into a major cold spell. People were going to be off trail for at least the next couple days, so this hostel was booked up, and I ended up going down into Blairsville, where I stayed for a couple days, and that's where I made my final decision. This is the next day. It's still snowing out. It's still really cold, and that's at lower elevation. And they're calling for like 6 below temperatures at elevation this coming week. So I've already spent almost a half a month's budget staying in hostels and hotels and eating town food already. So I wasn't prepared for that mentally, and I really should have. That was my other big mistake. Starting in February, I should have planned ahead and realized, you know what, you might have to front load your budget for February and March, because you may have to come off trail for weather issues or other trail related issues, and later on when it's warmer weather, then you can make up for it and spend less time in town and in hostels and out in shelters or out in your tent. So that is definitely something I would do differently. I would be mentally prepared to do that. So let me just kind of recap a little and tell you what I do differently and then what's to come. The very first thing that I would say I would do differently, well, I wouldn't do it differently, but if I go back, which I'll talk about later, is I would not do the approach trail the same day I'm going to push on to something like Stover Creek. Unless you are like in super good physical shape, you've been, really training going up and down mountains. But if you're the average hiker in average shape, at the very least, I would do the approach trail on one day and then shuttle up to Springer and start from there the next day. That's the first thing I would do. So if and when I go back, I'm not going to do the approach trail again. Once was enough for me. I'll start at Springer and continue on from there. Number 2 is you absolutely have to dress properly, even if you only think you're going for a few miles or only going to a hotel or a hostel or something like that, because if you get delayed out on trail, you will pay for it, and it could end up being not a good thing. The other thing is if you're starting early, before the bubble, February, January, or even the beginning of March, I would plan on
at least mentally understand that your budget may be higher the first month or two, and then it will level out later on. And if I go back again, I'm probably going back in February again, but it will at least I'll understand that I may have to spend extra time off trail depending on the weather. My gear's only rated to so low, and so I have to be prepared for that. And then those were the main things. Now that I've been off trail for a couple months now, I do think I maybe overreacted some in that, yes, I made a poor judgment call, and I should have never made that judgment call. And that's really what kind of tripped me up. But I know my abilities, and I know that I would have been okay from that point forward. I did get through. Scott got me through, and even if Scott wasn't there, I would have figured it out, and I would have made it down. And if worse came to worse, I could have, stopped somewhere, built a fire if I had to, whatever. But it really is not that far from the top of Blood Mountain down to Mountain Crossings. I just had to navigate my way off of there. So that being said, what is the plan for the future? I have to go back up to New York in June for a wedding, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up and I'm going to, after the wedding, thru-hike the Northville Placid Trail, which I wanted to do last year as preparation for the AT. It's 138 miles in the Adirondacks from the town of Northville to the town of Lake Placid. And so I will be doing that. I'll be vlogging it. And then I will probably go back to the AT. And since I only did 32 miles of actual trail, I'll probably just attempt another through hike. And I will start at Springer Mountain this time. I am going to do it in February again, I'm pretty sure, because I really want to avoid the bubble. But I will plan on front loading my budget, or at least understand my budget will be higher in February and March than it may be later in the year. But even now, people are having to get off trail and go around because of wildfires. So it's been an interesting year for 2025 on the AT. Anyway, any other things that you can think of, or any thoughts, drop them in the comments. If worst comes to worst, I'll section hike it. But I've learned from this, and I hope you have learned something from this, so that this doesn't happen to you on your through hike. And that's about it for today. So have a good hike, and I look forward to watching you as you through hike the Appalachian Trail, and maybe I'll see you out there.